And we're back with episode 2 of season 3 of the My Favorite Girl Caregivers Corner podcast, where we bring inspiration, education, resources, hope, and strength to caregivers so you can keep going, keep pushing, keep loving, and by all means, keep caring. And before I go any further, I want to ask you to take a moment now, if you haven't already, go ahead and subscribe to the podcast on whichever platform that you are listening on. Then, after you get done with that, go ahead and send it out to your family and friends, especially those who you know that are caregivers. I am truly excited and elated to have my guest on the podcast with me this episode. Just a little bit of background. She was born in the city by the Bay, San Francisco, grew up in Bayview, Hunters Point, which was a predominantly Black community. After graduating from San Francisco State University, majoring in mass communications with an emphasis in writing for television and film, she relocated to Los Angeles and began climbing the industry ladder. Success was indeed the reward as she quickly moved up and wrote a couple episodes on the Will and Jada Pinkett Smith's hit sitcom All of Us. She also worked on several other sitcoms at various capacities, including One on One, starring Flex Alexander and Kyla Pratt. I remember that. I used to watch that show. Second Time Around, starring Nicole Ari Parker and Boris Kojo. Y'all know Boris. And Jess Jordan, which is a Nickelodeon show. And while honoring her skills, she was abruptly met with a responsibility that cultivated into a passion with a purpose. I'm going to allow her to talk about that more as we go along. But at this time, I'd like to welcome to the podcast Miss Asoniti Foster. Welcome.
Thank you for having me. Okay, so it's Asoniti. The first I is silent.
There it is, Asonti. Y'all saw how I jacked that up real quick, but that's her name, Asonti Foster. Thank you so very much. And Asante and I met a couple months ago. We were on a webinar together with the Alzheimer's Association and just, you know, clicked immediately, just having some conversations in regards to our caregiver journey and just the things that we were talking about on that webinar. And so during that particular conversation, I talked with her then and said, hey, I'm going to have you on my podcast. And she immediately agreed. And so it is she that is joining me on today. And so we're just going to go ahead and kick right into the conversation. Just like we stated in your bio, you were in Hollywood working with some big names. I love me some Will Smith. I understand, things happened over the last year with Will, but I still love me some Will Smith and Jada and all of them. And so you're doing your thing in the industry, working with these big names in Hollywood, and then abruptly life kind of shifted for you. So walk us through that journey, if you will.
Absolutely. First, thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to be here and share my story and hope that, someone can relate to it and know that they are not alone. So yeah, I'm in Hollywood and Hollywood has the highs and the lows. And I had this huge deal on the table. I'm talking about like block money, not buying new bags. I'm talking about buying new blocks. And all of a sudden, it literally just dissolved in my hands. And I was spearheading this project, and it was poof. And I was devastated. And that was like my last shining light that I had because I had so many other experiences that, traumatized me. My daughter's father died on Christmas Day from a motorcycle accident. Then both my grandmothers died from Alzheimer's back to back. So like I was holding on to this Hollywood hope, right? This big deal. And then yeah, poof, right? Like caught me just by surprise. I'm down and out. And I received a call to help a great aunt of mine who was suffering from Alzheimer's at the time. And I'm like, the last time I saw her, she was fine, but okay, yeah, help her. Like I have nothing else. And I really liked and loved, this great aunt.
Yeah.
So I'm helping her and I felt so good. Remind you, I'm feeling like crap though, prior to helping her because I had lost everything and I'm helping her now. But then I'm also listening to her repeat herself over and over, and I'm like, wait a minute. Both my grandparents, other great aunts. I'm like looking at my family tree on both sides, connecting all of these dots. And I'm like, wait a minute. Can I get this? Can my daughter get this? So the more I kept helping her, I also started researching this a lot more. Like, okay, what is this disease? Because when both my grandmothers were diagnosed, years ago, it was like, okay, I'm growing up with Alzheimer's, right? Okay,
Yeah.
both my grandmothers, this must be natural and normal because of the, bookends of life, but like they are the matriarchs, of the family. They both have this. So yeah, this is normal. This is
This is
okay.
what's supposed to happen. That's what we tend to think
Exactly.
about.
Exactly. And but then when my great aunt was diagnosed and I started helping her and I started doing research, I'm like, no, that's not supposed to happen. No, wait, no, wait a minute. And I can remember the day when I found out that women are more likely than men to have Alzheimer's, and African American women, we are twice as likely to have it than the national
Mhm.
average. And I was so upset. I was like, somebody needs to do something about this. Who can do something about this? And this is going to sound beyond corny or weird or whatever word you want to use, but I literally heard you could do something about it.
And I was just about to say that. You.
Right. And I'm like, what can I do about it? I'm like down and out right now. I don't have anything. I don't have any money. Like I just don't have access to any. I'm trying to pull myself up out of a ditch. What can I do with Alzheimer's, like this global disease? And because I have an entertainment background and more so behind the scenes, it came to me that I could actually produce a documentary about it. And so I'm like, okay, I could do that. But with what money? Right? And what supplies and how am I supposed to do this? And then my daughter runs in my room with her cell phone and she's like, oh, look at this cool edit I just did. And this was like a really cool edit. And at the time she was, oh my God, she might have been like 8 or 9 then. And I'm like, you did that? She's like, yeah. And again, here's this voice. There's your co-producer and there's your camera. I'm like, and so we set off on this journey to produce, an Alzheimer's awareness documentary titled Puzzled, focusing on it's for everyone, but the focus is on women with a highlight on African American women and people under the age of 65, because what people don't realize is
Early
by
onset.
the time. Right. But not even in addition to that, by the time you've been diagnosed over 65, you really had it. Scientifically proven, you really had it 20, what is it, 10,
15 to
20
20
years.
years.
Right,
15 to 20 years prior.
right. Prior. So why are we waiting to talk about this when we retire and sit down when we could do something about that now? Well, what does that look like? That looks like mental health, right? Stress, depression, anxiety, lack of sleep, lack of physical activity, lack of the sun, right?
Yeah.
Vitamin D, not drinking water, not having positive influence. I mean, there's a laundry list of risk factors that we can actually reduce prior to any type of diagnosis in hopes to derail it, right?
Yeah.
To prevent it from happening, to you as best as you can.
And it's always amazing to me how the things that happen to us in life, they seem like, this is the end of it all. Like, man, you lose everything and all of the things that you go through to get to this point where you realize that, man, this is really my passion. This is my heart right here. And to be able to be on the top where, you're on the top of your game doing what you're doing, about to make another deal, and this happens for it to all come full circle, for you to now realize that, what, would you have really been happier doing the other thing that you were doing as opposed to where you found your passion?
Right.
And so that's what we have to consider as well, even as we're going through, because I will tell you, if anybody would have told me that I would be in the position that I am right now, being a caregiver, 48 years old, going on 7 years of it, and nobody would have ever told me I've been at this place in my life. But just like you, being thrust into it, making the choice, not really being thrust into it on the level like that, but just making that decision to say, you know what, my mom needs care. I'm here. I'm going to make it happen. And it turned into that passion. And, even as you're speaking, you're talking about who can do it? You. How do we do it? Just like we're doing right now, telling our story,
Mhm.
sharing our story, making a difference one life at a time. I don't know how many people will hear this podcast, but if it's one, if it's 100, if it's 1,000, guess what? We have done our part in helping to get the word out there. And so, kudos to you for even taking on that challenge. But you have your aunt, you have, your grandparents. I think right now we talked about it. You're now caring for your grandfather.
Right. So I was caring for my grandmother, my great aunt, and then also researching for the documentary, right? Which was working, together, because the more that I knew about the disease, the more I knew how to help her and to care for her and what to really be mindful of. Like, I was really like self-educating, but also, preparing for this project. And then the pandemic hits, right? Oh my God, mental meltdown for everybody globally.
Listen.
So I no longer had access to her because she was in an assisted living facility, right?
Okay.
So they were really like no one in, which, on one hand was difficult, but at the other hand, it was like, okay, she's safe, right? And then I get a call that my grandfather had been diagnosed. This is like the middle of the pandemic now, because this was like summer. Like, what? Like, no, I talk with him on a regular basis, right? But we can miss the signs, especially
Right.
when it's early on. And so there was no hesitation. I'm there. Now he's in San Francisco, right? And I go to San Francisco often. So it wasn't like I'm going back to some place that I, don't regularly visit. I go back, and yeah, he has Alzheimer's, but it was, very early on at first, so you really would not know unless you really paid attention and had done your research.
Right.
Hence the documentary, right? So I'm like, okay, this research is starting to come in handy. And my daughter and I now, we actually fly back and forth every couple of weeks. We stay there for a week and a half, 2 weeks, and then we come back to LA. We stay for a couple of weeks. We go back up there, stay for a couple of weeks. And a lot of times when I share that story with people, the first reaction is like, oh, it must be so hard. And oh, I know that's taxing. And it's like, no, that's not the energy that I'm giving right now. I'm not telling a sad story. I'm not singing a sad song, right? Now, one time have I been like, yeah, I'm flying back up and I hated it so hard. You did not hear that come out of my mouth. All I said was, that is what I'm doing. And I actually enjoy it. Sometimes I don't even unpack. I mean, I wash everything before I
Yeah.
leave, both places. And I'm like, okay, I can wear the same thing. I mean, it's not like I'm going to the club. Right? I'm
Yeah.
waking up and I'm cooking and I'm cleaning. I'm
And
caring for
taking care of
him.
him.
Yeah. So I'm not trying to be, dolled up, just very easy, comfortable clothes. And then my daughter is also there. She's now 13 and has been doing this. She's online school. We
Okay.
stayed.
That's what I was about to say. Is she homeschooled, or so she does everything virtually?
Yes.
So that's
Yes.
very convenient.
It is. And fortunately, she was a student who excelled online. Now, had I known that all she needed to do was be online, I would have never spent all that money on private school. Because
Listen, my
we
daughter
did.
did the same thing. My
Mm-hmm,
daughter was home, the entire year that they were out for with COVID. Now she's
mm-hmm.
always been straight A student, but she actually thrived even more online. She missed the environment of school and her friends and what have you. But I mean, every 9 weeks, I'm talking about almost straight 100s in every class, and these are honors classes. So for some of them, they do well. And so that situation just happens to work really well. If she's doing online, you can go back and forth. Shoot, that's pretty good.
Exactly, it worked out, and we actually had in-person challenges in school.
Okay.
Academically, socially, it was just I was always up there, and like a parent, right? Because I'm a very super active. I don't play with people, kids. Don't play with mine.
All right.
I make that known everywhere I go. Um, but when she got online, it was just a lot more focused.
Okay.
And even with us traveling between Los Angeles and San Francisco, she's still very focused. I could just see her maturing in different areas. Now she does have after school programs, that requires her to be in person. She plays the French horn, and she's actually been doing that for about 4 years now because she was doing it prior to the pandemic in person. So she's in person with that. And then she's also in a drama class, and they just performed the Annie musical in Los Angeles. So she's, I still have her socially involved, right? Because I don't want her to get burnt out behind this at such a young age. Because we do know that
Right.
caregivers, right, we also increase our risk. And I'm not trying to increase my daughter risk at 13.
Right. And that's very important. That's the one thing. My daughter was 10, 11 when we started, and it was very, and still now, very important to me that she didn't get overwhelmed with care. Very much, helpful, wants to help with everything, does as much as she can. I'm constantly telling her thank you, but it was very important to me that she did not feel overwhelmed or get overwhelmed. I wanted her to continue to be active in all of her extracurricular, and trust me, there are a lot of them that she does. She has her own nonprofit. All of
Right.
that is making sure that she can still do her own thing, but then at the same time understand what it means to be able to care for somebody else. And I didn't have a hard time with that because she's always been that child who has just loved to love people. She's always gravitated to helping everybody. But that is something that I think is very important, that they get to experience it as much as they can. I'm always grateful, and I'm forever telling God thank you to be able to have a teenager who doesn't mind helping to care. That alone is just, a blessing.
Hmm.
Never complains, never, I mean, will always just, mommy, what can I do? When she realizes that I'm a little overwhelmed or tired, she'll tell me, Mom, why don't you go lay down? I got granny. And at one point I had my mom and my grandmother that we were caring for
Mm-hmm.
simultaneously in the same house. Um, Matter of fact, my grandmother passed away January 29th of last year. So we're coming up on a year anniversary. And I mean, two of them at one time, both of them with Alzheimer's. My grandmother was 98 when she passed away, but she was with us for almost 4 years. And so it's very important, even for those that are listening out there that have children, it's okay for them to care, but then we have to also make sure that they don't get lost
Mm-hmm.
in the caring, because they have lives. And the other thing that was important to me, I didn't ever want her to feel like she couldn't do something or couldn't go somewhere because of the responsibility that I took on
Mm-hmm.
caring for my mom. So I made sure, there was a point where she was in color guard with the band. And so, I wanted to be present and make sure that she sees me, because I didn't want her to ever feel like, well, you couldn't be there for me because of this. And sometimes people, they can, grow some type of bitterness and about that. And so I never wanted that. Not that I don't think I ever would have had to worry about that, but didn't even want to chance it. And so what I would do, I would literally have somebody to come over on Friday nights. I would wait until about time that I thought it was halftime. I would get out to the game and had to pay to get in. I would pay to get in, go out there, watch her perform, and leave right after.
Mm-hmm.
Out on the field and everything with my camera, recording,
Mm-hmm.
taking pictures, because I wanted her to understand that as important as Granny is to me, so are you.
Mm-hmm.
And so, and that's where we get into, and I believe, if I'm not mistaken, when we talked about it, you said that you actually have copyrighted that term, sandwich generation.
Trademarked sandwich
Trademarked
caregiving.
it. Yeah,
Yes.
there it
Yes, I
is. So you
did.
got the trademark. Everybody uses it, but you got
Right.
the trademark.
Right. And it's interesting because when I think about doing that, for one, I think about how Alzheimer's is one of the most expensive diseases in the world, right?
Ooh, tell me about it.
And African American women are twice as likely to have that than the national average. right? It's like how much money is poured, well, how much money is supposed to be poured into caregivers, right? We're not paid for this. This is something you do because you really, really care. Okay, there are different programs and services available, but are you really getting paid with your worth to what it is that you're doing? No. So at the end of the day, for me, trademarking that was okay, wait a second. This is something that could help me, push my movement at the same time, right? Just like Alzheimer's Association is trademarked, right?
Yep.
You can't just use that,
And just use it.
right? They own that. So when are we as African American women who are twice as likely to have this disease than the national average going to start owning some things within this Alzheimer's community? Excuse me. Even with you with your podcast, you own this.
Yep. Yep.
So yeah, and as a sandwich caregiver, it's interesting because you mentioned how your daughter doesn't complain, and I don't know if you consider this a complaint, but my daughter compares. you know
Okay.
she'll ask me something and then I may say no, or she'll ask again, and it's like, first of all, I'm doing something, so you're not even saying excuse me, right? So I won't even respond. But she'll ask me something, and then like I said, I'll say no, and she's like, oh, but if it was Papa, you wouldn't have said no. You can not compare yourself to a 41-year-old man who has Alzheimer's, who has lived his life.
I think that's that manipulation tactic that children sometimes use on us, but hey, I'm like, at that age, they learn how to manipulate to get what they want. But I guarantee you what she's getting in helping to, care of being there. I mean, especially now, that's the thing that's important to me as well in this day and age. The fact that you have so many people, especially our young people, who they're so entitled and they
Hmm.
don't really care about anybody
Hmm.
or anything. A lot of them, not all, but a lot, they only care about themselves and what matters for them. And if it doesn't matter for them, who cares? And so to have a daughter like yours and one like mine who, don't mind. I mean, to me, I cherish that on
Hmm.
a level that, she's high, very, very high level. And I learned, because sometimes too, as parents, we can gain that mentality of thinking that, oh, they're supposed to do it, right? And so I've learned that no, this is not the norm. And so it takes away nothing from me as her parent to say thank you.
Hmm.
Thank you for helping me with Grant.
Right.
I was doing it tonight because I was preparing for a podcast. And so she was out watching her while I was finishing up. And, she gave her dinner and all of that. And so I'm walking out to get something and I'm saying thank you. And she's always like, Mom, you don't have to thank me. It's what I do. And I'm like, no, thank you, because I don't want her to ever either feel, taken advantage of or,
Hmm.
that she just had to. But I mean, that sandwich generation, there's quite a few of us, especially now, because what we're looking at is, as we talked about earlier, you have a lot of early onset um, Alzheimer's now. And you have a lot of people who are in that place now where they are, as they're aging, the parents are aging. And the thing about it is, people are living longer. Our older people are starting to live a lot longer. And so, as they live longer, they develop Alzheimer's and other dementias. And so, then you're left with us, we're in our 40s, some in their 50s who are now having to not only care for mom and dad, or mom or dad, but then you also have this child who is also in the house. And so you're having to explain what the sandwich generation is.
So for me, as a sandwich caregiver, it is caring for two generations at the opposite ends of life, and we're right in the middle, right? So my grandfather, 91 years old, who has Alzheimer's, is at one end of it, and then my 13-year-old, who is just growing and developing and trying to get to where he is at the the opposite end, and then I'm right in the middle of all of that, where it's like, oh, I've been there and done that where you are, and then here I am, like, okay, but I haven't been there and done that where my grandfather is, you know. And for me, I feel like my situation is a little unique. Not that this doesn't exist, because I know that it does, but I feel like most caregivers who are women, they are caring for their mother, right, or a grandmother, where I'm actually caring for a grandfather who's very traditional, you know, as my grandmother, as my daughter likes to call him, a Jesus person. You know, in the church, in the Bible, believe in prayer. We say grace before everything, right? And so with him, there's, you know, only so much that he will allow me to do. Like, my cousin and I also share caregiving responsibilities. So when I'm not there, my cousin steps in, and he and I just, oh my God, like, do, in my opinion, we do a great job together, because it's very common for especially family members to not be able to work together
Yes,
to care for
man.
one.
I'm not even gonna talk about that today on this one, but
Right. So it's a blessing, you know, to have him, my cousin Will. We really work well together. But like, when my cousin is there, you know, he can actually go in and help bathe him, shower him, right? My grandfather's not letting me do that.
yeah.
You know, so I'm constantly at the door listening in, making sure he's okay. You know, he's at the point now where it's interesting, because I'll, you know, tell him to get in the shower, and he's like, "Oh, let's not go first." And then my daughter is like, I already took a shower, you know? So it's just interesting for me to be in the middle. I'm telling him to take one. He's telling her to take one. And she looking at me like I took one already. And I'm like, what is the dynamic is going on here? No, you need to take a shower. But with my cousin, you know, he may be able to say, come on, let me give you a shower.
Okay.
Right. So I
And
have to
he'll let
use
him
other
do it.
tactics, right, with him and getting him in the shower. And, you know, my daughter, for the most part, she'll just hop in. You know, I really don't have any issues with that. Um, Again, the comparison has been the biggest challenge as being a sandwich caregiver. In fact, my daughter does like these little skits after dinner in front of my grandfather and I. I'm like, please let me record these. Like, we laugh so hard. We are crying. And she's not like imitating the good things about us. Right? She imitates all the bad things.
Okay.
Right. But we are having a great time. And so she did this one when she's like, this is how you talk to Papa. Hi, Papa. Hey, you want some water? Okay, I'll be right back. You want some lemon in it? You want some lime in it? Okay, I will go get that for you. And she's like, but when it come to me, and I'm like, Mama wants some water. Go get it yourself. Okay, first of all, that's not true. Second of all, that's not true. You know, but to hear her interpretation of it, you know, is interesting. Like, do you really think I do it like that? And I know she's over exaggerating a little
Yeah,
bit.
yeah.
But at the same time, it's like, okay, again, as a sandwich caregiver, sometimes I do talk with my grandfather differently from how I'm talking with my daughter.
Yeah.
And it's not to be nice or mean to one or the other. It's just like, okay, first of all, how many times have I told you to stop doing something that you keep doing? So by the time I tell you again to stop
It
doing it,
sounds like that.
exactly. But she's like, you wouldn't say it to Papa like that. I wouldn't have to say it but one time. And if I did have to
What?
repeat it, I would understand he has Alzheimer's. So there's a
Right.
difference. So
So
it's
so
that
what stage
balance.
is he in? Would you say is he's like early still, or he can still do for himself?
I would say he's definitely starting to exit the early stage and into the middle stage, because
Okay.
yes, he could still toilet, he could still feed himself. Um, he could still, you know, move around. When I first started caring for him, we could go to the park and walk forever, or walk around the neighborhood. I mean, walk like almost half a mile, right? Just walking through the neighborhood. And now he's challenged with even walking down the stairs. You know, I
Okay.
really have to, like, hey, Papa, go check the mail, you know, because it's downstairs, you know, like in the basement, the mail slide. And he's like, oh, I didn't get no mail today. I'm like, well, let's go see, you know. So that gets to be heartbreaking,
Yeah.
to see the slowing down and really just wanting to sit and sleep and, you know, nap all day. But then he's up all night.
Oh, wow.
Right, you know, and my thing is, okay, well, let me at least get you in your pajamas, right? Get you comfortable, because I know if I push him and make him get in the bed like I would my 13-year-old,
Uh-huh.
he's going to, resist that and become irritated and agitated. And so will my 13-year-old. But at the end of the day, you still under my guidance. Whereas
Right.
my
And you still gonna
grandfather,
get in the bed, whether you want
exactly.
to or not.
Exactly. And I don't push that with him because you earned it. So at least he's in his recliner. He'll have on the news, right? And I'll go and I'm constantly checking on him. It's at 1 o'clock in the morning. Papa, you ready to go get in bed? Oh, I need to watch the 10 o'clock news.
So
Okay.
you don't have to be in there with him. Even if he's up all night, you don't have to be in there with him. He can sit up and do what he's doing. And see, yeah, we are totally different. My mom's in a more advanced stage.
Mm,
She's in the later stages, and so she can still feed herself to a certain degree. You know, I hope no one gets offended by this, but I affectionately call her my 80-year-old 3-year-old.
mm,
And what I mean by that is literally she's 80, but when it comes to eating, it's literally like a 3-year-old. It's gonna be all over the table, it's gonna be all over the floor. No real knowledge anymore of utensils. Every now and again I'll get her to use them. So we're doing more finger foods, more things that she can pick up. And
mm,
like rice is almost like a no because it's going to end up all over her and everything else. But you think about the earlier stages in the early going into middle and the heartbreak that's there. For me, when you multiply that times, I happen to come in on Sunday from church, and I have a volunteer who's here with her during the day. And as I'm walking in, volunteers sit there both at the table, and she's trying to get her to eat. And this was I mean, it happens periodically, but not on the level of where it was Sunday. So I pause, as I'm coming in to try and get her to understand what is being meant by, eat your food, because typically, if you put it in front of her, of course, we have to sit there with her while she's eating, but she
mm,
can still, even if she picks it up with her hand, she will. But literally, I'm trying to explain to her, eat your food. She had some bananas, with her breakfast. Girl had cut them up, and I pick up one and give it to her, like, hey, eat your banana. And she takes it out of my hand and she looks at me like, what am I
mm,
supposed to do with this? And I tried for maybe about 5 minutes to get her to just understand what I meant by eat your food. And it just wasn't happening because it just did not register to her what I meant by eat.
mm.
Even though she was hungry, she didn't know. And even when I was trying to pick it up and feed it to her, she's like, no, I can't. And so, you know, that's heartbreak. You you learn how to process it, right? If I dealt with every one of those moments the way I could, I'll be sitting up in here in a straight jacket.
Right. You and
And
me
it's like,
both.
no, no. And we're going to get to the next part of this and what helps me, just the fact that you learn. And I'm going to move over into what we are actually going to talk about a little bit more in detail, the Puzzle 2020, the company and what that is. Because when you talk about dementia and how it progresses. For my mom, to me, it seemed like it progressed really quick. It's like you wake up one day and they're a totally different person. And as it progresses and you're watching it day in and day out, and something as simple for us as taking a bath. I give her a bath. I do showers and baths. I'll put her in the bath, and showers are easier
Mm,
because my shower is large enough that I actually just get over in there with her, have my clothes out, strip down enough and get over in there with her, and I can
mm,
bathe her really quick. But then there are other times because she likes baths. So I put her in the tub, and she's in there, I bathe her, and so then when it's time for her to get up and I'm telling her, okay, come on, let's get up, let's get out, she's clueless. And so most of
mm,
the time it's taking me about 5 or 10 minutes just to get her to understand that you have to stand up and get out.
Mm.
And so, it can be heartbreaking. But, as we go into talking about Puzzle 22, as we talk about that, that is the one thing that helps me. And so tell us about your company. You start this company, Puzzle 2020. Um, Tell us about it. What is Puzzle 2020?
So, Puzzle 2020 was birthed during the year of the pandemic, hence the 2020, right? We already have Puzzled as the title for the documentary focusing on, Alzheimer's awareness, how to reduce your risk factors, right? We already talked about that. And what I didn't want to do was produce another problem, right? In my Oprah voice, right? You get Alzheimer's, you get Alzheimer's, everybody get Alzheimer's, right? And now we're back into this state of panic and fear, which I definitely am not trying to present that. But the documentary does take you on a emotional roller coaster, and I wanted it to end with something positive, right? And so the more I kept researching this personally and professionally now, I discovered that writing down what you're grateful for significantly, scientifically reduces stress, depression, and anxiety. It improves sleep patterns, it improves eating habits, it increases your sleep habits. I'm like, okay, these are all the things that we need to be doing to help reduce the risk factors of Alzheimer's and boost our mental wellness. So, and I'm in the middle of all of it too, right? Experiencing this myself. So let me give this a try. And so my daughter and I started writing down what we are grateful for in about 21, 30 days, right? Because now we formed a habit. I started to feel different. And I'm like, we didn't win the lotto around here. Why am I walking around here feeling so good like we
Just
did?
being grateful.
Exactly. And then it hit me like, oh my God, we have to package this up. We have to put this out there. We have to sell this to, because if this can work for us, this can work for other people. Let's really, like work on this. And it was at that moment while developing our gratitude bank and our gratitude journals. And let's see, I know I
Yeah.
have one
I'm
behind
gonna
me.
I'm gonna have I have mine. I ordered mine, y'all. I got mine. So this is, and I've already started putting mine in here, but this is, I know those of you that are listening, you can't see this. So I'm gonna invite you to to the go to YouTube, check out the video from this podcast. And yeah, you can go on Amazon and get yours too. You can find it if you type in on Amazon Puzzled 2020 Gratitude Attitude Journal with meditation music. And I tried it. There's a QR code on here, y'all. And you scan it on your phone and it pulls up some nice meditation music. And so while you're thinking about what you're grateful for, you can listen to some great music. But this is what it is. So again, if you're listening on one of the other platforms, go over to YouTube, My Favorite Girl Caregivers Corner podcast on YouTube, and you can actually see, or just go ahead and go on Amazon and type in Puzzled Puzzled 2020 Gratitude, and that's the number 2020 Gratitude Attitude Journal with meditation music. There's a journal as well as the bank. I have my journal.
Nice.
And on the back of the journal, there's also a QR code that you can scan and get that wonderful music. And so both of them say gratitude is attitude.
Right, right. That was important. I mean, we're so quick to say, oh, such and such got a nasty attitude, such and such got a bad attitude, or even a good attitude, right? And so for me, in two words, it just made sense, have a gratitude attitude. Walk around with that type of attitude all day. And I promise you, I actually, before we really pushed it all the way out on the market, of course, as a sandwich caregiver, I was using it, my daughter was using it. And so I saw how effective it was for us. But then I also have my grandfather use it,
Okay.
and I do see a difference. Now, is he going to start running a mile tomorrow because he's writing down what he's grateful for? No. But is he exercising neuroplasticity?
Yeah.
Right? Kind of, as much as he possibly can at 91 with Alzheimer's, palliative care. Is he still doing something to stay with us? Absolutely. I don't sit him in front of a TV all day. In fact, he doesn't really go in to watch, TV until well after the sun has set. So let's say maybe 8 or 9.
Okay.
Yes, he'll watch the 10 o'clock news and then he's up until maybe, 2 or 3 in the morning sometimes. But, again, I pick and choose my battles, right? He eats everything that I give him, never, ever complains about it. um, he will, after a couple of, pushes and pulls, walk downstairs to go get his mail, and he will write down what he's grateful for. So the fact that he's still doing something to stay here with us, I was like, okay, this is definitely an intergenerational product. So it works well with kids. It works well with us in our middle age, that sandwich generation. And
Hmm.
then it also works well for people who have Alzheimer's.
Yeah. And it's just something about being grateful.
Yes,
I often tell people, even with me in caring for me, and it's me life in general, but perspective is everything.
absolutely.
It's everything. And so, I focus on not what's lost,
Hmm.
but what remains. How do I strengthen the part that remains? I've lost enough. My mom, she doesn't even recognize me as her
Mm.
daughter. She knows my name now. If she knows nobody else in this world's name, she knows mine. She,
Noah,
call-
baby.
she calls it all day long. She just does not connect it with me being her daughter. And so, that's a loss, right? But one of the things that keeps me, even in those moments where I do feel overwhelmed or I feel, heavy, one thing that my mom does on a regular basis. Now, she has her moments where she is what I call Miss Vera. She is Miss Vera and she has her moments. But one thing that she does consistently, she always says, thank you. And sometimes it seems like that thank you comes at just the moment that I need it. But, you're putting her in bed. I gave her a bath last night, getting her in bed, and she turns over and she said, thank you so much. Or I'm putting on her clothes and she'll say, thank you so much for taking care of me. And so she may not remember many things, but she remembers how to say thank you. She tells me how much she loves me. And so, even though she doesn't recognize me as her daughter, what she does recognize is love. And so, I don't care what's going on in my house. I work from home. And so if I walk out of my room during the day, it's like everything becomes all right in her world. And she's like, "Ooh," almost like you here. And then she
Oh.
wants to follow me. Sometimes she'll just walk up and give me a hug. And so those are the things that you learn to strengthen, in the midst of it all. And so being thankful, I try my best to just, God, I thank you. And it is that gratitude really is attitude, and it will move you just out of my faith background. I'm probably one of them people that your daughter would call the Jesus person, right? I am one proudly. And so what I've learned is to just be thankful. You why not? Because here's the situation. Here's the thing. You can't change anything that has happened, right? And so be thankful for, the part that you can. That's where that serenity prayer comes in. People talk about it all the time. That serenity. Give me the wisdom to know the difference between the things that I can
Mhm,
change and the things I can't. And
mhm,
so you learn how to, hey, listen, the other day I'm writing down because my mom had a couple days where she was up, over the last week and a half. She was up almost all night long. And so I'm writing down in my gratitude bank, God, I thank you that she slept last night. You have to flip it.
mhm,
Okay. Thank you that she didn't have an attitude. Thank you that she made it to the restroom. There's
mhm,
so many things that you can just turn around and say thank you for.
mhm,
Thank you that, I have a daughter who doesn't mind. I mean, it's so much. And you feel better when you start to just write it down. And I think that this is probably the neatest thing that I've seen. And it comes with the little gratitude sheets that you, and it has on here already starting you off. I am grateful for. You don't ever have to write that down. Just finish it off. What are you grateful for? It could be one thing, it could be 10, but you got the little sheets of paper and the pen. It doesn't get any better than that. It gets no better than that. And you write it down and you just stick it in here. And when you fill it up, you can order some more refills, or you can just get you some paper of your own and just continue to write. But it works on your mentality, your mental health, and it's everything. And I mean, I'm gonna go backwards a little bit because I do want to touch on this a little bit before we get off. I know when we were on the webinar having the conversation, um, the other young lady that was on there with us, we were all kind of talking about, just basically because your belief, which is, great belief, and but your belief is that everybody should get a checkup from the neck up. That's the quote that I put on there. Check up from the neck up.
Yes, absolutely.
And
Yes.
so check up from I go every year and I get a physical exam. And so your belief is just like you get that physical exam, you get that neuro exam. Check your brain
Absolutely.
health.
Absolutely, especially African American women. I mean, everybody, right? And I'm saying especially us because we are twice as likely to get this, right? But then
Yeah.
something interesting also came out too, just kind of going off on a quick tangent with the statistics. Football players are
Oh
8
yeah.
times as likely to develop Alzheimer's, right? So I definitely encourage anyone who is sports active, any of that, they should even go, much sooner, right?
That's
Don't
from
wait
all
till you.
those bumps and bruises in the head.
Absolutely,
Yeah.
absolutely. You figure by the time you become a professional player, you already been paying for what, 15 years,
Yep.
right? Since you were a child. I digress from that as far as just making sure that people do go annually to get a neurological evaluation. And it's very simple, it's non-invasive, it's not like they putting something over your
Yeah.
head and they trying to feed it. It's none of that. It is some basic questions that, just give you a baseline of where you are mentally. And that's what you want so that when you go and get another evaluation, you can start to compare them, right? Where are my strengths? Where are my challenges? Where do I have room for improvement? What do I need to change? It's the same thing when you get a physical examination, right? You're going in there, that the doctor doesn't just look at you and go, okay, your blood pressure is no, right? You have
You're
to
gonna
ask.
check it.
Yeah, exactly. You got to check that. And then when you go back the next year, if the numbers are off, if it's a little higher, okay, maybe adjust your salt intake, start exercising a lot more. Whatever it is that you need to adjust, you find that out when you go and get those evaluations, when you get checked up. So yes, I even went and got a neurological evaluation. I won't share my results because
Yeah.
I will release that on the documentary, but it's definitely something I encourage people to do. Yes, she was like, I don't think so, but how do we also stop this from attacking us then?
Right.
You
And
don't
see,
want to.
I think during that conversation, I was somewhere in the middle, right? I'm like, there are days, you're adamant about, yes, you need to go and get it. Other young ladies like, I don't think so. Me, I'm like, it just depends on the day, right? Because here's the thing. When you are caring for someone who has Alzheimer's, um, especially when they start to progress and they get to some of the later stages, that's a lot. It's a whole lot. I can't explain in words all the time the pressure sometimes that comes along with just watching it. There are some times, and I don't have many moments. I wouldn't dare make anybody think that I am just up on the mountain with this thing every single day. I try to be, right? And I will be honest, I don't have many down days. That's the truth. And I place that on my faith. I place that on the fact that, I do pray. I do read my Bible. I do work. And so all of those things are what helps me to maintain my sanity, my spiritual life, number one. And so I really don't have many down days. Does that
Mhm.
mean that things don't come and they don't become pressure sometimes? No. But then you have to be able to take that. I tell even my closest friends and my children, I give you 24 hours. Everybody gets 24 hours to feel however, because life happens to all of us. But after those 24 hours, all right, you got to strap your bootstraps up, and let's go on, because life has to keep going. And so, I do find my strength. There's a verse in the Bible that says the joy of the Lord is our strength. And
Mm.
so that is where I find my strength. And so when I get to those places, I'm making sure that I get to where I can find my joy. But I do have days where it's like, man, this is a lot, because I have a very photogenic memory. And so when something happens and I see it, it just plays over and over. And so then I have to find a way to bring my mind back to a place where I'm not over and over playing what I've seen. Because as I often tell people, it's different when this is your mom. This is not just somebody you just walk in and you're taking care of, but
Right.
this is the person that gave you life. And you're watching them gradually lose who they were to you, and who they were as a person. It doesn't change the fact that they are a person. And that's the thing. It's a whole different podcast that I'm going to talk about, because they're still people, right? The only difference between somebody with Alzheimer's and dementia is the fact that they have a brain disease. No different from anybody with cancer. They're still people. And so just because they can't remember who you are doesn't mean that it's okay for you to forget who they are. That's a
Right.
whole different episode. But I do think that it's important. There are some days when I'm like, yeah, I think there are days when I want to know, because I'm like, I question sometimes, honestly, I question sometimes whether or not I would want my children to have to take care of me in this state. It's
No,
a
you won't.
battle sometimes, right?
No.
Yeah. And
Right.
so it's those moments where you're like, yeah, I would want to know. And then there's other moments where it's like you're looking at this thing and you're like, man, I don't know if I would want to know. But then when
Was
you have that genetic component, I think it's important. When you're talking about your family, where you're talking about aunts and grandparents, and, there's a genetic factor possibly. When I look at my family, and I'm talking about my mom's dad, her mom, siblings, all of them except one that's living. All of my mom's siblings except one has it right now. Well, two has it right now. She had two sisters within the last 2 years that passed away. Two
mm,
brothers right now that have it. And so, yeah, there's a genetic factor, right? And so, that's that question. But I think it makes sense, to get that checkup from the neck up. Um, Whether or not I want them to give me the results right then, I don't know.
I'll say this about what you just said, because I definitely agree with you. And for a long time, I was on the fence, right? But what I'm realizing is that people don't want to take care of a problem until it's pronounced, right?
That's
So
true.
you start sneezing, right, and you coughing, and now you stuffy, and it cut to a couple of more days go by, and now you go to the doctor, and it's pronounced that you have the flu.
Yeah.
Right. Oh no. Okay. Now let me start treating it. As opposed to when you were sneezing, when you were coughing, when you were a little congested, you could have, reduced all of that had you have gone to the doctor or recognized yourself that this is snowballing into a problem, and then it wouldn't even be the flu anymore. It would have just been a little something that you were able to get rid of. And I don't have the alphabets behind my name, right? But I definitely have experience, and I've done enough research to where if I needed to get in contact with any type of neurologist in regards to Alzheimer's, I can do that at my fingertips, and they
Right.
are a blessing to me. And I'm saying this so adamant because when I do my research about this, and I'm like, okay, wait a second, why am I going to wait until I have the flu? Now I need everybody to come and bring me some soup, bring
Right.
me some medicine, or whatever it is, when I could have slow slow this down or reduce the risk factors. So when you go and get a neurological evaluation, they not saying, you know what, Miss Foster, you have Alzheimer's.
Yeah.
It's not that. It's to see where you are mentally to get you ahead of Alzheimer's, right? Because again, once you had it 15, 20 years prior, it looks like stress. It looks like depression. It looks like anxiety. But if you are not treating those things, you're placing yourself on an Alzheimer's track, and you're not exercising, you're not eating right, you're not going to sleep, you're not reading, you're not doing anything to exercise neuroplasticity in your brain. You are snowballing into the flu, right? When you could have done something about this prior. So yes, I'm very adamant about it so you can see where you are mentally. They may just say, you know what, you are severely depressed. Okay, that's a real thing that you can start to modify, right? Writing down what you're grateful for, listening to meditation music, going for a walk, changing your diet. Those are things that you can afford to change. By the time you get Alzheimer's, we're looking at $1 billion on a $1 trillion track for your care. No, I don't want my daughter to take care of me. Now, God forbid it happens. Yes, I would want my daughter because I know that she will be well trained, right? She didn't start, and I say this about her real quick. She not new to this. She been doing this.
And
So
she
even
true to
before
it.
right, she true to it. Before my grandfather was diagnosed and we started traveling back and forth, she was actually helping my mom. So she might have been like 4 or 5, and she would spend the summers in San Francisco with my mom, and my mom was caring for her mom, right? My grandmother, who was also battling Alzheimer's. So my daughter would be there, and caregiving looks differently, right? For her at 4 or 5, she was the companion, right? She was the play person. She would take her little stuffed animals and play with her, or she would comb her hair, or she would flip the magazine for her. Because, you know, by the time she started getting involved, my grandmother was in her final stages. But she is aware of Alzheimer's just beyond my grandfather. You know, she was much younger. So even with kids, you know, having a neurological evaluation on kids, right? Because kids stress, depression, and I feel like unresolved childhood issues snowball into unresolved adult problems, and it just keeps growing and growing. At what point do we try to prevent and derail and reduce? We don't. We just gonna keep on coughing.
Yeah. Well, I will say this. You definitely put it into perspective. Definitely put it into perspective for me, and I'm sure for a lot of my listeners. And so, you know, hey, I'm ready now to go and get me a neuro check, because you're right. You know, why wait until it becomes so much more than it has to be before you take care? We talk about early onset, right? Even knowing, you know, you can do so much more preventative measures up front. There's some things that you can do in the early stages that once it gets beyond a certain point, it doesn't matter. You know, you can do certain things, but you've already gone beyond that point where you could have changed some things. And so, you know, you brought it into perspective for me. You know, now I'm not really on the fence with it anymore. It makes sense. You're right, you know, to be able to go and get that done. And so I am totally thankful. I wish we can continue on. I have you back on. Know that we'll be doing some more conversations, but I do want you all to go to Amazon, and you can also follow Ashanti on her social platform. So follow her on Facebook. If you go to Facebook at Puzzled, Puzzled 2020, and that is the words 2020. So 2020, Puzzled 2020 on Facebook. And then on Instagram, you can follow her at Puzzled 2020. Check out our website as well at www.puzzled2020.com. That's puzzle and then the number 2020.com. You can also find her website link on my website, which is www.priscillajjeanlouis.com. You can find her on there as well. She's under the resources under self-care, because this is a matter of self-care for us to be able to write it down. I think this is absolutely awesome. You can get the bank, the I am grateful for bank as well as the journal. Good way to go ahead and get started into, exercise your brain, change your attitude. Gratitude is attitude. Even if you are a caregiver, you're out there, if you're going through caregiver stress, because it's real, it is very real. I would also, you know, uh, push you as well. Go out there on Amazon. You can find it. Puzzled 2020 gratitude journal. Go out there, get you a journal, get you a bank, and start to just jot down what you're grateful for. Support her. Now, Ashanti, one last thing. When is the documentary coming out?
So the pandemic definitely slowed the process down, and but we're looking to head into post production this summer, and the goal is to release the documentary in November, which is officially Alzheimer's Awareness Month. And it's
Yes,
the
it is.
holidays, families are together, so
Yes.
you know, I'm really looking forward to this because I know that this is definitely going to be different from anything that's out there because we added a little flavor to
I
it.
love it. And hey, I'm going to have you on long before then, but we're going to talk about the documentary. We want to be able to support that, get that information out there. Ashanti and her daughter are advocates as well. I love it because mother-daughter teams are the best teams when it comes down, because you have our generation as well as that younger generation who's out there advocating for Alzheimer's awareness, helping to make people aware of what Alzheimer's look like. So again, I want to thank you for this time. Thank you for joining me on this episode of the podcast. And as always, before I leave, I'm always going to give a shout out to the Alzheimer's Association. So those of you who are caregivers for someone with Alzheimer's, we want to remind you that the Alzheimer's Association does have a 24/7 hotline. If you are experiencing any type of caregiver stress, with the loved one that you're caring for, it's overwhelming, please give them a call, 800-272-3900. There are live persons there that are out there willing to listen to you, help you, give you direction, resources, what have you. Please take advantage of that. Again, go ahead, follow Asoniti, Facebook, Puzzled2020, Instagram, Puzzled2020, and then check out her website, www.puzzled2020.com. You can go on Amazon. I believe you can go through her website as well and purchase some of these wonderful materials as well that will definitely help you. The Gratitude Bank, nothing like it. And listen to the music as you're writing. So thank you again for listening to today's episode. Catch us again next week. We got a special one coming up next week. As I said earlier in the podcast, next week will be 1 year since my grandmother passed away. And so catch our episode next week where we are going to talk about Love One. Love One. So tune in next week to the podcast. Until then, you all be blessed. Thank you again for listening to this episode of the My Favorite Girl Caregivers Corner podcast. I'd also like to invite you to visit my website at www.priscillajeanlouis.com. There you'll find more information about me and my journey with my favorite girl. There's also the resource spot where you'll find many resources to help you as you are on your journey. Hey, stay connected, and remember, no matter what, keep going, keep pushing, keep loving, and by all means, keep caring.